presenting today is requirements that are already in statute or rule, or the Code of Federal Regulations. So what you'll hear from Jim and Heather is already in effect, but it's just to provide you more of a clarification. What you'll hear from myself and Dr. Lee is a proposal on the curriculum that we hope, with the feedback we received, that most people will be supportive of this, and then probably it will take effect on, we hope, January 1st, unless we receive a lot of feedback that is not positive, then we might have to go back to the drawing board. But if we receive positive feedback, we hope to make this effective early part of January. So with that brief presentation, we want to
This is for the state of Michigan, and I'm an owner of a Michigan proprietary school. So this webinar is for my nurse aid division. So I'm here for the webinar, then I'll go see my patients. We'll do that next.
Nurse aides certified, and that about half of those nurse
and things
aides
are
work in
changing,
nursing
so I want to
homes,
be ready for the new
the other
year
half of the
and
nurse
roll
aides
out the
work in
program with
other care
good
settings, and the curriculum is
fucking
more
benefits.
designed to be useful in all care settings and not primarily focused on nursing homes, but they're going to be applicable. So you'll see that it kind of shifts from a focus of nursing homes to just general healthcare settings. So with that, we will switch over to a different document, and then I will turn it over to Heather and Jim.
So when I go live, this is what I'll be doing.
Just give me a second there.
Nurse Ratchet.
And Jim, if you can give me a heads up that you are seeing the overview, Jim and Heather. Do you see the overview yet?
I did. I was trying to share my screen because I was going to bring the document up so I could scroll through it, but whatever you want.
This is the new world. Instead of us
You
going
wanna
to
go and take
Lansing, the
control?
capital of Michigan, this is how we're doing it. And I'm going to share because I think we need more entrepreneurs, and I'm here for the shenanigans.
And Jim, we can go. We can see the document if you can scroll to the top.
I'm so very interested because I want to be trying to get an accredited school aboard,
Yeah,
like
work.
the LPN.
Yes, and
So I'll
can
be
you
tutoring
increase
that, but I'm
the,
interested in this.
Screen size a little bit at the bottom of the page. Maybe just a little bit more. Thank you. Looks good.
So, yeah, thanks, Larry. Good morning, everybody. We'd like to thank you all for attending this meeting so we can go through the changes that we've made or discussed. Just from a historical standpoint, the last time the curriculum model was updated was 2014, which is before really any of us that's currently involved in this program was working in the nurse aid section. So this document that we have here is just, it's an overview of requirements for each nurse aid training program, like Larry said, from a federal standpoint and from a state law standpoint. So it's good information for each program to have and reference in terms of, you know, your permit, your requirements, that type of stuff. So it's a handy document you're going to want to keep. So the first thing, the program permit requirements, we talked about what you have to do to run a nurse aid training program. You have to obviously get a permit from the department, which is renewed every 2 years. We discussed when the expiration is. The second section here has to do with program responsibilities.
Trying to get y'all in here.
We have to keep our website updated, so you can go there too if you have any questions. We kind of explain stuff a little bit more in detail there. But a training program, if you're a proprietary school, has to have a proprietary school license from Leo. the department that regulates that. You have to have sufficient permitted nurse aid trainers and supplemental instructors to meet the needs of the program. You have to have a permitted nurse aid trainer on site and engaged during the laboratory and clinical hours. We did open this up to virtual hours, so you can, in terms of on-site engaged, have your permitted trainer supervise virtually. We include that you have to have a physical and social environment that is conducive to learning. You need to maintain a student achievement record that documents successful program completion by a student. I know in the past that was quite a lengthy document. I've actually had quite a few questions about that, but we just are requiring that you have one. We're not telling you exactly what you must have on that, so that's really going to be up to each program. You need to maintain a policy and procedure to investigate complaints filed by a student and make that available to the department upon request. You need to have an active nurse aid training program permit to provide training to students. And the Michigan curriculum model, which we're going to discuss, just has to meet the minimum 75-hour requirements established by the federal government. And that, how you do that breakdown, we're not telling you when you get to that document exactly every hour that must be done. It's really going to be up to your discretion. But if we ask you for how you account for those hours, you need to provide that to the department. Each program has to have a permitted nurse aid trainer that's responsible for the daily operation of the program. That nurse aid trainer permit is tied to your RN license, so you need to renew that with your RN license. All that's done by a separate bureau. The nurse aid trainer permit is done by our bureau. Some of the conditions for being a nurse aid trainer: you must have an unrestricted Michigan registered nurse license. In order to become that trainer, you have to have 2 years of nursing experience within the last 5 years immediately preceding the application, including teaching in a healthcare related field or job that requires the use of the nursing competencies, and at least 1 year experience within their nursing career in long-term care facility services. And then we define what that 1 year is in terms of hours. A nurse aid trainer must have completed a course in teaching adults or have experience in teaching adults or supervising nurse aides. One of the big things I know that was on the former curriculum model was there was a trainer to student skill, in which we have eliminated, was established anywhere in federal or state law. So we just said that you're going to need to have or each program is going to need to have enough permitted trainers to meet the program needs. So that's really up to your discretion. But the course that the federal government requires of teaching adults can really help you in knowing how many students you really can handle, that type of stuff. Oops. So the primary permitted nurse aid trainer, their responsibilities are you need to be accountable for the entire program, the classroom, the lab, and the clinical. You need to participate in the planning and evaluation of each segment of the curriculum. You need to monitor new trainers and supplemental instructors in lecture, lab, or clinical whenever that individual is teaching something new for the first time. You may delegate classroom, laboratory, and/or clinical teacher responsibilities to a supplemental instructor, and you're responsible to assure demonstrated competency on a student achievement record. We talked about these supplemental instructors. It's just really anybody that works under the supervision of a permitted nurse aid trainer must have experience with the topic being taught by having at least 1 year of experience in that field. We get into then the minimum training requirements, which this is all established by the federal government. So a nurse aid training program must offer a minimum of 75 hours of training that include a minimum of 16 hours of classroom and 16 hours of clinical instruction. That is directly taken from the federal statute. So you have the 75 hours, and you take the 16 hours of classroom and 16 hours of clinical, that leaves you with 43 remaining hours. And all he said was that the 43 remaining hours can be a combination of class, lab, including simulation, or clinical hours. I talked about earlier about virtual classroom, but if it's used, there must be a mechanism or method for student feedback and interaction with the nurse aid trainer. We did define simulation means an artificial representation of a nursing care service to achieve educational goals through experiential learning. Laboratory may include simulation, and simulation does not count towards the clinical hours. The 16 hours of classroom training, the federal code establishes that must be done prior to any direct contact with a resident. And they also establish in those 16 hours what it is specifically you must teach the students. So we list them here. It's communication and interpersonal skills, infection control, safety emergency procedures, including the Heimlich maneuver, promoting residents' independence, and respecting residents' rights. A training program must provide a minimum of 16 hours of supervised clinical instruction, and supervised means where the student demonstrates knowledge while performing tasks on an individual or through simulation under the direct supervision of a registered nurse or a licensed practical nurse. In a facility-based program, this training may be performed by or under the supervision of the DON for the facility. I think this is an important one, but we list it as a pre-service competency, but it really says that any training program must ensure that students do not perform any services for which they have not been trained or been found proficient by a permitted nurse aid trainer. Virtual teaching. So clinical and laboratory hours must be done in person, but classroom hours may be in person or virtual. If a synchronous virtual classroom is used, there must be a mechanism or method for student feedback and interaction with the nurse aid trainer. We just think that's important instead of just putting something out there that they watch and have no way to ask questions. It's important that they have that feedback. Training program topics. A nurse aid training program must provide training on the following topics as required by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services and the Code of Federal Regulations. So basic nursing skills, taking and recording vital signs, measuring, recording height and weight, caring for the resident's environment, recognizing abnormal changes in body function and the importance of reporting such changes to a supervisor, and caring for residents when death is imminent. The other is personal care skills, which they want covered to include bathing, grooming, including mouth care, dressing, toileting, assisting with eating and hydration, proper feeding techniques, skin care, transfer, positioning, and turning, which to us is a very big one. The whole transfers and positioning and turning, we see a lot of those issues and cases that we investigate for neglect or abuse by nurse aides when providing care to residents. So that's really something I would encourage every program to spend a lot of time on. Mental health and social service needs. So you need to teach modifying age behavior in response to age behavior, awareness of developmental tasks associated with the aging process, how to respond to resident behavior, allowing the residents to make personal choices, providing and reinforcing other behavior consistent with the resident's dignity, using the resident's family as a source of emotional support, care of cognitively impaired residents, techniques for addressing the unique needs and behaviors of individuals with dementia, Alzheimer's, and others, communicating with cognitively impaired residents, understanding the behavior of cognitively impaired residents, appropriate responses to the behavior of cognitively impaired residents, and methods of reducing the effects of cognitive impairments. Then they got into basic restorative services, which is training the resident self-care according to the resident's abilities, use of assistive devices and transferring, ambulation, feeding and dressing, maintenance of range of motion, proper turning and positioning in bed and chair, bowel and bladder training, care and use of prosthetic and orthotic devices, residents' rights, which include providing privacy and maintenance of confidentiality, promoting residents' right to make personal choices to accommodate needs, giving assistance in resolving grievances and disputes, providing needed assistance in getting to and participating in resident and family groups and other activities, maintaining care and security of residents' personal possessions, promoting residents' right to be free from abuse, mistreatment, and neglect, and needs to report instances of such treatment to appropriate facility staff. This is a big one because I look at somewhere between 1,500 to 2,000 allegations that we investigate against nurse aides for those three allegations. So the more we can teach people about those three, educate them, and understand what can potentially happen to your nurse aide certificate if you do one of those three things is important. Avoiding needs for restraints in accordance with current professional standards. So the Michigan curriculum model provides additional content to supplement the regulatory requirements outlined above, which Larry and Dr. Lee are going to get into. Program objectives. We wanted to clearly define what our objectives are for a nurse aide training program. So the big thing is the provision of quality services to residents by nurse aides who can form a relationship, communicate, and interact competently on a one-to-one basis with residents, demonstrate sensitivity to residents' emotional, social, and mental health needs through skillfully directed interactions, assist residents in obtaining and maintaining functional independence, exhibit behavior and support and promotion of residents' rights, and demonstrate observational and documentation skills needed in the assessment of residents' health, physical condition, and well-being. That is what we would like for each nurse aide student that goes through a nurse aide training program in the state of Michigan. We just listed a historical review, just
and basically, this is just the rules about being a nurse aide. You know, the first step is to get through the nurse aide, but if you're interested in setting up your own program, go through the state of Michigan, do the work.
The second was in 2006, the last was in 2014, and this one. And I think when you see the actual curriculum model, you're going to be, I would say, probably amazed, because as we all know, the former document was quite lengthy, and you're going to see that this one is not. So I guess that really covers my document. Heather, do you have anything you would like to add to that, or Larry?
Thanks, Tim. I think you covered everything. I did answer questions in the question box, but there were a couple I wasn't sure of. Can you answer, or do you know if they're still having the train the trainer class in Michigan? Is that still happening? That was one of the questions.
I know that leading aides used to have a class. I'm not sure if they still call it that or run it. I don't really know the answer to that question. So.
Okay.
One thing, Heather, this is Larry. So one thing I do want to talk about train the trainer, and Jim and Heather can chime in there too. I think a lot of people over many years have been confused about, is this a requirement? The train the trainer is not a requirement. You do not have to have it, but you do have to have a permit to be a trainer. And one of the requirements to get a permit to be a trainer is the demonstration of a skill of teaching adults. And the trainer-to-trainer program was just one of those that you could go out and take, and that would help you demonstrate. But there's other ways to demonstrate it. But train the trainer is not required. It's a supplement to help you demonstrate the requirements that you have experience teaching adults or had training in teaching adults. So just wanted to reemphasize that, Jim.
I paid for that twice. The bitch failed me the first time. Bitch said I cheated. How you cheat on teaching someone? Fuck it, though. I took it again and I did well. And where is she at now? Sound like she's out of a job. I'm sorry, that was nurse
When that
ratchet.
law came into play, it essentially eliminated that. So anybody that had a train the trainer, you didn't really have a permit, and it wasn't forever. So you are now required to have a permit by the department to become a nurse aid trainer. So we don't use the term
I like
train the
coffee.
trainer anymore, other than I know people reference that in terms of that class, but there is no more train the trainer, and you have to have a permit. It's got to be renewed every 2 years.
So you're permitted
And
now,
then, Jim,
not
there's a
train a
couple
trainer,
more
so I'll drop that
questions I
shit.
wasn't 100% certain on. I wanted to get your input on it. One of the questions was, will the student achievement record be updated?
I talked a little bit about that, but what we said in here, and I'll try to go back to
Student achievement record.
Achievement record.
I'm interested in that.
So here, when you look at program responsibilities, all we said was that you must maintain a student achievement record that documents successful program completion.
Oh, I keep the certificates and on the back the grades.
In the past was a lengthy document. We don't want to tell you what your student achievement record must contain. You just need to have them. That's really up to each individual program as to develop that, to document everything that they taught that student and what that student's achievement record was. It's really just going to be up to you. So once this is adopted, there is no formal student achievement record. It's up to each program to develop.
Yeah, so Jim, just correct me. I mean, really at the end of the day, when we come in and we do an audit of, kind of like an audit of the program, what we want to see is if you said, hey, I had 16 students successfully complete the class last course, we'd want to see a record that somewhere it's documented that, Larry Horvath on this date successfully completed the course. It could be a very detailed record, or it could be a simple record of affirming that Larry Horvath has completed the course, successfully completed the course on this date. Correct, Jim?
Yeah, and I would think you could break it down into the two 16-hour requirements, and then the other 43. Just make sure that you have an achievement record that shows the person successfully completed the program and it was 75 hours. So.
And there's a couple more questions. One of them is, for those that want to start the CNA program, do they only need the permit? And I believe you said they need something from Leo.
Well, if it's a proprietary school, so non-long-term care, non-high school education, then you would need the additional permit or license from Leo. But without knowing exactly what program, if you're just an individual that wants to start a program, yes, you obviously need a permit. And if you want somebody else to run the program, then you need a permitted trainer that is responsible for that program. So those would be the two requirements, irrelevant of anything else. I mean, if you want to start a program, you got to have a permit, a training program permit, and you have to have a permitted nurse aid trainer that's responsible.
Okay, and then what are the ways that, or what are we accepting for ways that we prove that an individual has been able to teach adults? What are some of the experiences that your team's accepting?
Let me say something before I answer that. One of the other big changes that is coming is the state of Michigan is developing a new software system to issue, renew permits for nurse aid trainers, training programs, and for the nurse aid registry itself, which the state has never ran. So we are developing that system, should be live sometime next year. So in that system, you will apply electronically for a nurse aid trainer permit or training program. There are going to be certain things that you must acknowledge when you submit that application. And so you may acknowledge that you have that experience, but you should really keep track somehow of either through a resume that you worked as a director of nursing or you supervised nurse aides for a period of time that meets that requirement. It's really going to be up to you to keep your documentation. So if we ever audit you later on, you're going to want to have some sort of proof that you did actually meet those requirements.
So there's quite a few questions that are coming in, but I know Larry is going to continue to talk, and so maybe we should pause with the question. I'll pause with the questions now, and then some of those questions may be answered throughout the presentation moving forward. Does that work for you, Larry?
Yes. And one thing I there's a couple of things. This document that Jim just shared, we'll make that publicly available. We'll update it from the questions we received today if it needs to be updated. Just going, even though we have handled this document and reviewed it several times, you always see something different. And things like, one thing that we might want to add is the supplemental instructor requires a permit. So a supplemental instructor basically has no permit. It's only the nurse aide trainer that we permit. The nurse aide trainer, though, is responsible for being able to demonstrate to us that, hey, I hired Jim Wiggins as my supplemental instructor for my program. I can demonstrate that Jim is teaching on these topics. Here's Jim's experience to teach these topics. He has 1 year of experience. So there is no permitting process for a supplemental instructor. That is the responsibility of the program. So we might add a few more sentences on that. It really is, the permits that we are issuing is for the nurse aide training program and the nurse aide trainer and the certificate or registration for the certified nurse aide. So appreciate you. Oh, Jim, I was going to see you say one more thing.
Well, we'll get to your questions. I see one here that's kind of irrelevant right now, but I think Carrie asked, can a nurse aide training program have more than one primary instructor? Absolutely. You can have however many you want. We just need somebody who's going to be identified as the responsible party. With our new system, that person will be the one logging in and doing updates and changes. So,
and keep in mind on the permitted instructor, our requirement is you have to have at least one, but you have to have as many to run the program. So keep in mind that you will see requirements that the permitted instructor must be available during certain periods of time, such as clinical time and laboratory time. Well, if you're running 2 or 3 clinics at the same time, then how do you demonstrate to us that they're available to all 3 clinics? Now, if you can do that, then obviously you can do it with 1 instructor. But if you can't demonstrate that they're available, then obviously you might want to look at 2 primary instructors. Or, you'll have the primary instructor that's going to be the lead of the program, but then you'll have the other permitted instructors that will help you cover other areas to make sure you have a permitted instructor available during clinical hours. But our requirement is a minimum of 1, and then however many more you need to meet the requirements of the program. Jim?
There's just one other. I see Rona asked a question about the renewal dates. So when I talked about the renewal time period of dates, that was for training programs. Your nurse aide trainer permit is not on that same 2-year cycle. It is always tied to your RN license. So you have to have an active RN license. So when you see that your registered nurse license is set to expire with the Bureau of Professional Licensing, that should prompt you to say, oh, I also need to renew my permit with our Bureau for the nurse aide trainer permit. So training programs and trainer permits are 2 different cycles. One is a fixed date every 2 years. The other one is always tied to your registered nurse license.
With that, we'll go ahead and say.
So you have to be a registered nurse in the state of Michigan.
Talk about the curriculum. And I will pull up the curriculum here.
I have to save this and post it because not a lot of people know about this site. It's my new site, Nurse Ratchet. I'm going to give you some education and then I talk my ratchet shit too. This is if you want a business like I have in the state of Michigan.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks, Heather.
Now we're going over the new curriculum, which I'm going to have to print.
Everything's covering up my Zoom. I can't see my Zoom.
My son, who is a lawyer, he's
hopefully
also a nurse.
Everybody can
he's
see
my other person.
this document. But But, so
Larry,
one thing yes.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you make it just a little bit bigger? It's kind of small. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm trying to find my Zoom feature on this. But
I'm sorry. You said that
my toolbars, and I can't minimize my toolbars, is causing me not to be able to. Let's see if I can. Is that better?
Yes, much better. Sorry about that. I realized afterwards that that's what you said you couldn't get.
That's all right. So we're going to talk about the curriculum here. And one thing I want to talk about is a couple of things. When you take a look at the current Michigan curriculum, it's about 190 pages long. And it's very prescriptive, in which it
Hell
says
yeah,
you
it's
should spend
ridiculous.
On this topic and this many hours.
I'm throwing that shit away.
Templates. What you're going to see in this document is we're going from 190 pages, which is very prescriptive, to a less prescriptive document. And this one is really competency driven, and this was kind of promoted by the community college. So what I'd like to do is first turn it over to Dr. Lee to talk about competency driven curriculum models and why you will see such a drastic change and how this kind of plays out.
Thanks, Larry. Yeah, so just as a kind of a background on why we even started this conversation with the state, was really we have a shortage of CNAs all over, and we have new programs.
Oh, my class that's in December is $300. I'll repost it. It's a special. Come out of your goddamn houses and come get an education.
Embedded in the curriculum.
Everybody go away.
So a curriculum that is competency based allows you to be a little more flexible in the way that you teach it. You guarantee that you're hitting those goals, but then you can add to rather than subtract away when it's necessary for the program and the individuals or the facility that you're training for. Competency also allows us to really meet the needs that the state has now with certification and completion. So the more individuals under the 60 by 30 plan is that we want individuals certified. And if we have a competency-based program for CNAs or for nurse aides, just like we do our registered nurse programs and our other health programs, we can articulate learning back to that. So an individual that's trained in a facility we can say competency-wise, after they've passed that nursing exam, that they have met those competencies and they can be tied back to something that's happening at the college, and we can articulate credit and we can issue certifications. We could also allow individuals that have met those competencies, let's say through an RN program, that can be tied back to then say they're eligible to now take a nursing exam and become certified as well. So it's a lot easier for us to develop a program around needs in any given time through a competency-based model versus something that's very prescriptive. And with the policies embedded, it made it feel like everything had to be done that way, creating some challenges in some of our communities when it was time to do training and education. So when I reached out to Larry and Jim, we talked about how do we do this to help meet the needs of the state, and not even just the state. I think this model actually is being looked at nationally as well, because it really allows us to train individuals, make sure they're meeting those minimum standards of the federal government, but then ensuring that we can tailor the education beyond that and help bring more individuals into the field as needed. I'm trying to think if there was anything else, Jim or Larry, that you wanted me to bring up around like some of these changes.
Yeah, and what I'll do is kind of go through this, but can you talk just a little bit about our columns, the cognitive and the psychomotor?
Yeah. So the cognitive knowledge versus the psychomotor means that we've taught it in theory, and now we are making sure that you can replicate that through activities and skills. So when we say identify types of verbal and nonverbal communication, we go through those different examples, and then we replicate that into a skill-like setting and into our clinical areas so that individuals understand that, all right, I'm evaluating a patient and we're having a conversation, but maybe some of the words aren't aligning with what they're saying, and so you're doing objective and subjective learning. But how does the student really know that just from reading it? Now we do it through the skill and the practice. we have the student work with an instructor or another student, and you give them a scenario, and then they take that learning and apply it in that scenario to ensure that there's mastery of that skill, so that you can then now move on to the next set of skills needed.
So this part of our presentation, we don't think will take very long, but we will get this out to you again so you can review it and provide feedback to us. What you will see here is if it is a CMS requirement, we notated that because really this is prescribed by the federal government and we don't really have flexibility to modify this. So right here, when you take a look at it, this is what CMS requires, a minimum of 16 hours prior to any contact with the resident. And CMS prescribes these topics here. But what CMS doesn't prescribe in those 16 hours is what is the knowledge base and what is the skill base. So when you will see these phrases here, these are things that we developed as a work group with the community college of what would be some of the knowledge that we would want in this communication requirement, and then what would be some of the skills that somebody should demonstrate. So you will see that what you have here is, and we're trying to make this easy, so when we're talking to you on the phone and you have a question, you can say, well, really, I'm looking at 1A, or I'm looking at 1A1, or I'm looking at 1AA. And we understand that if the last digit is an alpha character, we're talking about a skill. If the last digit is numeric, we're talking about a knowledge. And this gives us the category. And you'll see all of these are 1A and 1B, but these are the requirements that CMS has required of us for those 16 hours. And then we, again, went through this. So like safety emergencies, identifying safety techniques, accidental exposures to blood, bodily fluids, and chemicals, demonstrate the Heimlich maneuver technique. That's a CMS requirement. So you can see this one, we added, this is CMS required, where these other ones, when they don't have that, it is a state requirement because we identified it as a good skill or knowledge set to have in this. So you will come all the way down and here, you know, respecting resident rights is another CMS requirement. We've identified these items. Now here you'll come into the next, and so the first 16 hours before a student actually works with the residents, then the remaining is the 59 hours. And that's why we have here. And the remaining 59 hours can go through a classroom, which can be virtual, laboratory, or clinical settings. That's where your 59 hours is. Now keep in mind, we still have that 16-hour requirement in the document that Jim showed. The 16-hour requirement is clinical, is also required by CMS. So of these 59 hours, 16 hours have to be clinical. Here you will see CMS required. Now, when we get into these requirements, when you're more into, you're past the pre-training, the initial training, you're past that first 16 hours. Now you will start to see that there are a lot more CMS requirements inside the knowledge portion as well as in the skilled portion. You will start to see, and what we always try to do in this document is if it's a CMS requirement for this topic area, we always try to put the CMS requirements first, and then the later requirements are requirements that the state has identified as either a good knowledge set or a good skilled set that we want to require. When we go, Amy, did you have something? Oh, okay, sorry. When we go down, and hopefully, I don't know if we can talk about this in the Q&A. I'm not really going to go through each one of these categories. These will be things. 90% of this you're probably already teaching, if not, maybe 100% you're already teaching. So again, you can see personal skill. The next one is mental health and social services need, care of cognitively impaired. So once again, these are all basic restorative services, resident rights. Now, when you get to number 8, you will see that this is not a CMS requirement. This is actually a state requirement. We thought this was a good idea to put in, that they really that a nurse aide really needs to understand the regulations in which they're going to be governed under. So we kind of put in these requirements to kind of help prepare them to understand that you're getting a certificate from the state, and these are your basic things that you're going to be held to. The other thing that we thought that the feds don't require is to talk a little bit more about legal and ethical issues. Now, CMS did have a requirement here about applying privacy and maintenance of confidentiality. That's the CMS requirement, and we included in our part, we added the words including HIPAA. But these are things that we added as a state. But you can see from 190 pages, now as a curriculum, or now as a Michigan model, the training programs need to look at this table and make sure that they're teaching these core competencies as part of their curriculum. And the other reason that we've kind of scaled this back to 9 pages is we as an informal work group, we asked, how much can you, if you're going to do the minimum 75 hours, can this be captured in 75 hours? And we think the 9 pages can be captured in 75 hours. What if you have a program that's 120 hours, you might focus a few more hours on an area that you think really is a need. You may add a different topic that we don't require. It doesn't prevent you from adding topics or spending more time on a topic. It's just we tried to say in a 75-hour course, what is the minimum we can squeeze in there? And that's where we came up with these 9 pages. So with that, we're pretty much at the hour time, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot of questions. And I don't know if it would be beneficial for me to read through each one of these. I think once you see the document, you'll see that most of these knowledge and skill sets you're already teaching, and it just re-emphasizes it. Dr. Lee, anything you wanted to add from that?
Yeah, I just want to say that, from a curriculum standpoint, the thing to remember, curriculum is a continuous process. It can be evaluated and changed as the change in society and in the profession grows. Policy are much harder and slower to change. So having these 2 documents separated, I think makes it so much better. And I also just want to point out that this is the minimum. So a lot of the colleges do way beyond 70 hours, but we have employers that need to meet that 70 hours. So there's the flexibility within that. And again, based on the idea of competency, these align closer to individuals wanting to go to be an LPN and RN and advance their careers beyond it. So we can go back and we can evaluate those skills and the knowledge base to ensure that students are where they need to be.
Jim, would you like to add anything?
I think you covered everything from my end, Larry. Thank you.
Jim?
Yeah, I don't have anything else either, Larry, other than you can see we went from a lot of pages to very few, which is something usually you don't find in government, but.
And I still think, even though we went from a lot of pages, I mean, Mo James, our analyst who does our inspections, will still be out there. I mean, just because we don't have a supply list, like the other curriculum model had a supply list, what you should have. These are still expectations that you would have these things to meet the needs of the training for your students. I mean, just because we don't prescribe a supply list or what you should have in the laboratory, there is that minimum expectation that you would have the necessary supplies to teach this knowledge and skills portion of the curriculum. And again, we're not prescriptive like we are in the current curriculum that talks about so many hours for this topic and so many hours for that topic. And like Jim said, we want a completion record for each student, but we're not going to be prescriptive on that. You guys are in the business of teaching. You understand curriculum. You understand what these records you got to maintain for your own business purposes, that somebody's completing a course with you and you're giving them a certificate of completion for that course. So with that, I don't know, do we, Heather or Jim, I don't know if you've been monitoring the Q&A, but we can open it up at this time.
Yeah, Larry, can you answer a general question, I think, for 2 things? A, when will this draft curriculum become available and need to be followed?
So the document that Jim went over, that basically is requirements currently in effect by statute, federal regulation, or soon to be administrative rules. After we receive input from today's session, if there's something we might have to tweak on that. So the document that Jim presented, we'll listen to everybody's feedback. We might do some tweaking, but I expect that to be posted probably out on our website in the next couple of weeks, just as a helpful tool of what are the minimum requirements for a program. As far as the curriculum, probably we will want to listen to the feedback today, make modifications. We'll want to do one more review, but our goal, unless we really.
I asked, how long do you need to maintain the student record? Because I have so many student records that I literally have to get my son to come work in here.
Jim, for the new system, the online system, when do you expect that to go live?
We are looking at next year, probably May or May to August, somewhere in there.
Our target goal, I mean, obviously when you're building an IT system, we've hit a couple of snags along the way. We had hoped to roll out a lot sooner, but I'm pretty confident that we will roll out in 2023. We're hoping May, but at a minimum, we're going to say 2023. Headmasters, once again, we should put in a plug for headmasters. We are very pleased with Headmaster, our new vendor for our testing. Just a reminder that Headmasters allows for the knowledge portion to be done online. So that's a real true advancement in Michigan. Also, Headmasters will come and do testing at your program. So that's an additional plus. So if you're not a testing site, we encourage you to become a testing site.
Oh, okay.
The one caveat we got to remind everybody is let's just say you have two programs. Your instructor cannot be the testing proctor at that site. So hopefully you could partner with somebody that, somebody who could be a testing proctor. You could switch with them so that you're testing their students, they're testing their students. But the more we can get programs actually signing up to be testing sites means that once the student's done with the classroom, they come back to the same place to do their clinicals. And so we really encourage, we have more testing sites than we ever did under Prometrics. So once again, we want to plug more testing sites. We need your help on that. But it's been, I think Headmasters has been a good addition to Michigan. They will continue to be our testing proctor. Once we take over the registry, we'll just take over the registry from them, but they're doing a nice job on the registry as well.
There's a couple of questions that are the same that has to do with does the program director or permitted trainer have to be present when a supplemental instructor at the clinical site? Our administrative rules that are going to be adopted do cover this, and yes, the permitted trainer provided each program has to have a permitted trainer that's available during classroom hours and provide that a permitted nurse aid trainer on site and engaged during laboratory and clinical hours.
One thing that came up in that question too is under the current curriculum, it talks about a program director. That's under the new curriculum, we don't have that requirement. We're assuming that your primary permitted trainer kind of is your program director. They're kind of responsible for the entire program, but we're going away from that term from a regulatory standpoint. If you want to have a program director, great. You're not required to have one. You're required to have at least one permitted trainer that oversees the program from a regulatory standpoint that can answer our questions when we come in.
And note too from that question, it's the 16 hours that they talk about that's required. So if your program goes beyond that and you have supplemental and others within the facility that can help with that training, and then your primary must be available to any of the supplementals as well. So it's that 16 hours that you pay attention to for the requirements under that document.
And this is a good opportunity to talk about the requirements for a nurse aid trainer. A lot of people ask us, well,
now pay attention, this is the requirements in order to be a nurse aid trainer.
Probably not going to be nurse aid trainers in the nursing homes. The problem is we don't know where those individuals, once they get certified, where they're going to work. And so we have to make the assumption that there is a probability that they're going to be certified nurse aides in a nursing home. And so therefore, the training program has to have that aspect of being able to teach, and therefore the federal requirements apply. And the federal requirement says that you have to have at least 1 year experience to be a permitted nurse aide trainer in long-term care. I mean, you have to have 1 year experience in long-term care to be a permitted trainer. So that's a federal requirement that's prescriptive. We can't change. It's not a state requirement, so we have to abide by that. Now, when we say that, is your long-term care training could have been 5-6 years ago. You just got to demonstrate to us, maybe over the course of 3 years, you got that 1,600 hours for long-term care. And we've expanded because the feds say in long-term care. They don't say in nursing homes. They say in long-term care. So we expanded that to be, did you work in a geriatric unit at the hospital? You work in hospice that deals with geriatrics, geriatric hospice. So we've expanded the definition of what long-term care is. We just have to have demonstrated proof that you have at least 1,600 hours over the course of your working career in one of those long-term care fields. That gets you a permitted trainer. But if you don't make the qualification for permitted trainer, you still can be a supplemental trainer because a permit's not required. The only thing is that the permitted trainer is going to be responsible for making sure that the supplemental trainer, so let's just say Larry Horvath's going to be a supplemental trainer and Jim is the permitted trainer. We're going to hold Jim responsible for Larry Horvath being qualified. So Jim allows me to teach dietary. And then we go and say, well, what's Larry's qualification for teaching dietary? Well, he has none. And we'd say, well, then Larry's not qualified to be a supplemental trainer. That would be a violation of the program. So, if you're using supplemental trainers in clinical, they have to have clinical.
Because everything's going to be posted in the nurse ratchet, and unfortunately, that's how I'm doing it.
So make sure whatever course your supplemental trainers or supplemental instructors are using, they have the expertise in that area, because we don't verify that until we come on an inspection, because there's not a permit required.
And one thing I want to add too, just because I've seen some of the questions come through, like the terms that are used. If it's been written by the federal government, we kept that word. But I would say from an educating standpoint, teach your students the term that's been provided by the federal government, but also the correct terms that we use now, and just explain to them if there's any differences between them. We didn't like the word toileting. I mean, if you talk to any of our educators, we're like, there is a much better way to use that, but that's the way that it's described in the federal guidelines. So we use that. You can, in your classroom, you have toileting, but then use it how it makes sense, and then just make sure the students understand that they're the same thing.
And we kind of did that with trainer and instructor, because the supplemental instructor is not permitted. So when we use instructor, it's a non-permitted person. And when I use the word non-permitted, it just means they're not getting a permit, not that they can't be. And then a trainer is a permitted person. So we try to keep those terminologies distinct.
Just to add something real quick, the new system it's called MyNATES that we're developing, and you will be able to do everything. It's all electronic pay, print your permit, your registration. It's instantaneous. You will update all of your information. There's no more mail, send it in mail, waiting for responses. Everything's going to be instantaneous. So it'll be a great system. I think everybody will be happy. And if you've used Headmaster right now for those nurse aides, it'll be the same thing, maybe minus one great feature, which is text messages for renewals. But we will be sending out renewal notifications through email. So email is how you're going to have to sign up to log into this system. So for everyone.
We have a couple emails pointing out that on the document they saw electronic BP. Is it still required to teach manual blood pressure?
Well, currently keep in mind that, and I apologize, I did not pull up the current curriculum model. So I believe the current curriculum model requires manual, but if we adopt this in January, it will not be required. It will be the electronic BP.
I didn't teach it because they weren't getting tested to it. So there you
Just
go.
to say, Larry, just to add to that, I mean, if a program wants to teach manual, that's absolutely okay. We put out the bare minimums as far as what is the basic requirements to become a certified nurse aide. So if that's something that your program teaches and wants to continue to teach, we would support that. It's just on our curriculum, we are putting out what the basic requirements are.
And you see, yes, teaching programs can be testing sites. There is that one requirement that the testing proctor can't be the teacher. So hopefully you can work around that and partner with somebody else.
I would just encourage everybody too, if you want to do that, reach out to Headmaster and they will hook you up.
And I have put in the chat the direct link to Headmaster's Michigan site, which has several resources that kind of address some of the questions that are in today's Q&A boxes. So please reference those. I've also put in several of the answers links to their site as well, and ours.
When this change occurs, or if and when this change occurs, you will not have to submit new curriculum to us. We will not have to verify that if you're in an existing program or this. You're going from a 190-page document to a 9-page document. So we're pretty comfortable that the 9 pages are already
This means my
covered in
son William has to
190
come in
pages.
here
So
and work.
if you're abiding by the 190 pages, you'll abide by the 9. You still can use that extensive document because it still has all the stuff. It's just that's not what we're going to hold you to. We'll just want to make sure that you're teaching this core curriculum. We do not have to approve your curriculum change as an existing program to comply with this. It's our expectation that when this takes effect, that you'll comply with it. We'll give you notice, and obviously we'll give some time allowed to convert over if people feel they need that time allowed. But pretty much, I don't think there's anything in here that will cause great delays in any current curriculum being modified.
have it set up, but I'm like,
You guys see any additional questions? I'm trying to look. I think the student record, I think we said it had to be maintained for 2 years, Jim. Is that what it was? I don't know if we put that in there.
excellent.
I can't remember now.
2 years, I'm purging.
Time frame in there.
I am making notes, so we will take a look at these questions when we go back and look, but I'll make a note to make sure that we do clarify.
Heather, I think you've answered this a couple times, but can you clarify the supplemental instructor?
Clarify it.
So I know there's
This
several
is Nurse
questions about what the
Ratchet.
supplemental instructor can do and what they can, what their background needs to be, and I might have to kind of slide into that area. I know Jim touched on it as well, but the supplemental instructor just has to have a experience. I'm sorry, I'm getting to this part of the document so I can.
Now you want me to?
Yeah, go ahead if you've got it right there.
So the feds just said that whoever you choose to use as a supplemental instructor, they have 1 year of experience in whatever it is they're teaching on. So if you want somebody to talk about occupational therapy, then you should have an occupational therapist that has 1 year experience. The load of examples are not exhaustive. So other people could meet that requirement to be a supplemental instructor that aren't listed in the federal code. It does not say licensed health professional. It gives many examples of people that would meet that requirement that are licensed health professionals. But like, for example, a nurse aide, if you want to use a nurse aide as a supplement instructor to talk about nurse aide things, then hey, have at it. They can do that because it doesn't.
As long as they have experience in that and whatever they're teaching.
Wait a minute,
Hi,
what?
Larry. Oops, go ahead, finish.
Oh, nurse aide.
Just that we don't want to see a program go, you know what, I'm going to delegate everything. I'm going to have a supplemental instructor teaching every single thing. It's going to be a nurse aide. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that you're going to use a supplemental instructor to teach certain things that they have experience on. Now, you can use an LPN for lots of things, but a nurse aide probably isn't going to be able to do many things that you would have an LPN do. So it's just an additional instructor.
So there was a question, and this comment it actually came up during our discussion as we were helping develop the curriculum, was that back in the day, the fundamental nursing program course originally aligned with the CNA, and so those individuals could take the state exam if they'd gone through their fundamentals nursing program. Under this model, we purposely used fundamentals as a blue plate to correlate these competencies. How did you decide, or how are you going to decide if a college can get that fundamentals course recognized for those students to take the state exam?
Can you say that one more time, Amy?
Yes. So our nursing programs have the very first nursing course is fundamentals. And so those fundamentals courses have usually more than what the CNA 75-hour programs have. And so the conversation's been around those individual students having the ability to take the state exam without having to go back and repeat all of those same courses and skills. Has the state identified a way to recognize or validate that fundamentals course for those individual students?
I think part of our problem is the federal requirements require that a nurse aid training program be passed. It's a two-pronged requirement. A nurse aid training program has to be successfully completed and then the exam. I did make a note of that, Amy, so we will kind of revisit that, but I think we revisit it once, but I think Jim, correct, it's the federal requirements that are sticking for us.
It's more now the state requirement that requires you pass a state-approved training program and testing. Now, the one thing or caveat that we could talk about is somehow getting those nursing programs to obtain a permit as a nurse aid training program as well. Therefore, since they have that permit, the students that are in nursing programs, we could say have passed a nurse aid training program, and then therefore they could just test. So that they don't have to go through a separate nurse aid training program somewhere else. If you already have a permit as both, then they qualify. That would be my possible solution.
So I did put that down as a future goal to revisit that topic, because I mean, the common sense logic is if I'm in a nursing program, I'm learning these skills and many more.
Well, and those students are really out working, and if rather than bartending the night before they go to nursing class, if they could be working in a facility practicing those skills, it makes so much more sense, and it fills that gap that we have from the employment side. So it's just a great pool, and it just makes sense.
But then we would have a shortage of bartenders.
Oh, stop.
Yeah, come on, what's your priority?
So there was a question about filing a complaint with us about any concerns with like a trainer or a program or anything. So I would encourage you to go out on our website, go to the Nurse Aid Training Program site page, and there will be contact information. And then you could use the mailbox to just send us, if you have a concern about a program, you can file a complaint with us.
Haters.
That will always take a look at that.
Trying to fix my glasses.
Looks like you're gonna
I
have
only
something.
wear
Yeah, just so you know.
Dolce & Gabbana frames.
The
Sorry.
state law was
It's just my
adopted
thing.
that established a permit for a nurse aid training program. It only said that we have the ability to write administrative rules dealing with the enforcement of those programs. So up until the point that our administrative rules are adopted, we don't really have any legal recourse to take action against a program or trainer. But once those are adopted and it's spelled out in there, we will be taking or can take enforcement action against a permit. So right now it's kind of just, we're hamstrung a little bit, but one of the things I talked about was we really are saying each program, you first need to deal with the issue if it's a student complaint, and then keep all your documentation of how you investigated, what you came up with, because when we get involved, we're going to want that information, so you're going to be required to keep that.
The one thing, there was a question about the state emblem and signatures on our certificate. We do have, we have been working with headmasters because they're the ones that actually issue it. When we take over the registry ourselves, then you will see the more recognized permit from the state. But right now we've been working with state headmasters on that, but it's kind of not a high priority for us because we know we're going to be kind of taking over the registry. There was a question about running a hybrid program, and is this a future goal? Now, I'm not sure what the questioner has when they define hybrid program, but one question is a hybrid program a virtual program? There is nothing that prevents you right as of today to offer some type of virtual program. Now, the virtual program can be mostly on the knowledge side. You're gonna do this virtually. That's acceptable to us now. If you have a program that's been what I'll call bricks and mortar, the traditional classroom model, and you're going to virtual, you do need to notify us that you're kind of changing how you're operating. So I think we would require kind of like a change notice, Jim, that they're going to modify their program just so we're aware.
I did.
Yeah, I would say currently that's the best thing to do.
Yep. Now, keep in mind though that the hybrid program, if we're talking virtual, that's the clinical you still have to have that clinical component. Having a contract work, they're still going to be out there getting their clinical skills in person. But yes, you can have a hybrid program virtual right as of today. Just we still want to know, how are you doing the virtual? You're using the curriculum. How are you assuring that students have the ability to interact with the instructor and ask questions? So when you modify to that kind of online program, we still want to make sure that the students have an ability to communicate with the instructors.
Larry, just a thing on that. So what we developed, we said, here's the 75 hours, here's the 216s, and the 43 is really up to you how you decide that. So you're going to want to technically have your own. How do you achieve those 75 hours? Because you're going to want to count for them extra 43 hours. So you really have your own curriculum, which you could change. Let's say of the 43 hours, you decide, you know what, I want to do, 20 hours of something else, and now we're going to change it because I realize that's not working for my students. Then still, you just tell us, we made some changes to our specific model that we are using. So you're going to have your own real curriculum. It's just going to encompass this minimum things that we talked about.
There was a question here about, can I have my clinicals in a hospital setting?
So we've allowed that. Oh, sorry. Is it okay if I jump in here, Larry?
Oh, I'm okay, because I don't want to stumble on this answer anyways, because this is kind of a.
We've allowed other settings as long as there's long-term care. So like a lot of LTACs that are out there in hospital settings, which are long-term care units, we've allowed that as long as the program can prove to us that there is, long-term care residents are getting long-term care. So I know we've looked at nursing homes and other homes for the aged, those types of things that we've allowed as long as they're getting the. Do you have anything to add to that?
Jim, did you?
He might be frozen.
Yeah.
Oh, he's.
I think he's hesitating with us. Let me throw out a caveat on that one. I would encourage you to submit a change request to us with your contract. Let us then review that and ask some additional questions. We want to be we got 42,000 people, and not all 42,000 are working in nursing homes. So we have to change this model to look beyond nursing homes. But we also have to assure that they're getting the basic skill set that they can work in a nursing home with these core competencies. So yeah, if you're interested in the clinical setting, let us take a look at it. But we might have, this will be new for us, so we might have a few follow-up questions, and it might be a little bit longer review. Jim, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, I was looking in our administrative rules. We didn't specifically say the location of the clinical hours in the administrative rules. It's not covered in state law. In the feds, when they talk about clinical hours, it just says other set. It doesn't specifically define it as long-term care. So that's something we will now go back and discuss internally, because we always, no matter what we do, we always look to the law. If the law is silent on it, we really can't have a stance against it, so we will look at that.
I mean, our concern is let me give you an example. We would probably have a lot more questions if you say you want to do your clinical setting at Children's Hospital of Michigan. Okay, that is not, that's going to be a unique clinical setting that we're not sure it meets the skill sets that we need to teach with talking about what the core curriculum model is going to address. Some of these things that you probably wouldn't be doing in a children's setting that you would be dealing in an adult setting. Working at doing clinicals in the geriatric unit of a hospital probably is much more acceptable than clinicals in a children's hospital. So interesting concept. You can always submit the request. We'll work with you and see what we can do.
Go ahead. I was just going to say there's a couple of questions on Headmaster regarding practice tests. And just to mention, the practice tests are national test questions. Our actual test for Michigan is, we did go through all of those questions and they are very Michigan curriculum related. So if you get a question here and there on the practice test questions that Headmaster posts, I know that's several people have commented on that. That maybe seem like it might be something applicable to another state, just skip that question, move on. We have talked to Headmaster about possibly going through all those practice test questions in the future. It's just a very time consuming and labor intensive thing that we have to do. We have to have a work group that we get together of stakeholders and us internally. So it is on our to-do list, but right now we use the national test questions for all states. So if you are
I
running
teach the
into
questions
that, I
you
know that was a
need.
question that has come up several times, just to clarify.
And to join on that, one of the things we just, when we contracted with Headmaster, we did an intensive review of the test questions. And usually you do that review every 3 to 5 years. But because we're going to change the curriculum, even though we really think the curriculum is not expanding, it really is just making a smaller subset of what already exists. It is our plan, we hope this year, to go back to Headmaster, even though it's been less than a year since we've looked at the test. We do want to go back to Headmasters and relook at the test questions in relationship to if and when we adopt this new curriculum model.
I'm going to interrupt for a minute. We have a couple of people with their hands raised for quite a while. Lori Mackey, I'm going to allow you to talk. Do you have a question?
Yes, I put it in the Q&A. It had to do with mechanical lifts.
Could you repeat the question on mechanical lifts?
Sure. In your curriculum, it talked about demonstrating. The student demonstrates the use of a mechanical lift. And in the past, the student achievement record that we used from the state of Michigan, it said on there that it was to be observed. So, and we're not allowed to use a lift on the floor with actual resident care. So what I wanted to know, to clarify, does this have to be demonstrated by each student in the lab with the equipment? Or can you, I'm not sure, it's a little confusing to me now in the new curriculum that you put out this morning.
Yeah, so Lori, I did mark that as an item for us to go back on and look
Okay.
at. The other thing, we're going to be putting this out as a draft, so you guys, we only gave you that for 5-minute show, so we're going to put this out as a draft, and then we'll give you an email address to kind of send your comments in, and then we'll take all those comments. We'll have a close date that send them by this date, give you at least 2 weeks. Then we'll take everybody's comments and review the curriculum one more time.
Okay, thank you.
But that's an excellent kind of question we would like to see.
Great. We have one more. Nicole Smith, do you have a question? Nicole, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Nicole
Yes.
is
Yes.
asleep.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I was just wondering if, can nursing students, like, so BSN, I'm also a clinical instructor over at the University of Michigan. I was just wondering, are nursing
Who
students
cares?
able to be supplemental instructors if they have experience? Or do they have to have a license of some sort to be a supplemental instructor?
No, there's no requirement for licensure, just the 1 year of experience. So I suppose if you, well, if you get your BSN, for example, and you've been doing nursing for more than 1 year, then you would qualify as a supplemental instructor. But if you're really giving instruction on nursing, I would think you'd have to have a license as a registered nurse.
But I think she's asking as a supplemental instructor, Jim, so like if a certified nurse aide could, you know, if they can
Yeah.
prove that they've had training in that, passed the class, had experience in it, we just have to have you work with us to, you know, kind of run that by us to see, because sometimes those circumstances are very specific to what training they've had.
I understand.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, it's sort of like,
She just wants
it's
somebody
easy
to see
for
her
us if
damn
you say,
face.
hey, Larry Horvath's going to do dietary. He's going to teach dietary as a supplemental instructor. And by the way, here's Larry Horvath. Here's his registration as a dietitian. We don't need to go any further because that Larry Horvath has a registration. We might ask, has Larry Horvath been doing it for 1 year? But if you have a licensed health professional, you can demonstrate they're doing it for 1 year. That's an easy question. If they're not licensed in that area of expertise or registered or certified in that area of expertise, then we might ask for additional documentation to prove their 1 year experience and why you feel as a trainer, a permitted trainer, that you feel this person does qualify and have enough experience to teach that subject.
And I would think that would be true too if they were like, because you asked if they had experience. So if they were a CNA working in a facility for so many years, came back to school working on their BSN, you know, they could use that CNA certification to verify, and then you identify maybe they're going to assist in the lab or something, and you could show how that makes sense with their background.
Okay, that helps a lot. Thank you.
Great. Larry, it is 11:27. We do have a couple more hands raised.
I'm
and we do
ready
have a
to
lot
go.
of open questions.
This is good. You
How
guys
would
stayed
you
on
like
here
us
with
to
me the
proceed?
entire time on
So
my
Tammy,
first
how
live.
many
It's no
questions
distraction, but
refresh
I
my
ain't
memory?
through.
We can print all the questions out. We'll have a record of those.
Yes.
Okay, so if we did not answer your question today, we apologize, but we will have a copy of the questions. We'll make sure that we review them. Then we'll modify and tweak as needed. We will be putting this out on our website with instructions on how to provide us feedback. We'll kind of shoot out a notice or something to tell you that, hey, here's the documents that we presented today. We appreciate everybody's time. We hope that you see some positives in these changes. We hope that this
I see
provides
nothing but
clarification and
positive.
helps you in your role and makes your life a little bit easier.
I don't
as a
do
nursing
hands-on
training
care. That's
program.
why I have my
I want
nails.
to thank Dr. Lee and all the time she spent with us and all of her members. I think we had like 6 or 7 members joining us for several months to try to come up with this concept and look at various state models. And you know, we dialogued about a lot of things. Should we just adopt a curriculum that has already been approved and have a list of statewide approved curriculums that you could go out and purchase? We kind of shied away from that, and we developed this competency-based model. You know, so we think this is an improvement. We will ask for your feedback. If we didn't get your question today or we didn't get to your comments, you know, by raising your hand, we apologize, but we hope this was helpful, and we will give you some mechanism to give us more feedback. So appreciate everything you guys do out there every day, and hopefully you see this as a positive going forward. And our goal is to have a consensus as much as we feel we have a good consensus to move forward and release this in January. So Tammy, I think we'll go ahead and end and let try to be on time with everybody. And
Perfect. I'll just follow up with everyone who registered, whether
Great.
you watched the video or need to watch it later, we will send out the documents to that list, as well as, I believe Larry said we'll be posting it too, so.
Again, thank you guys, and hopefully this was helpful. And again, thanks to our community college for initiating this and helping us throughout this process. And we appreciate anybody that provides us feedback. We'll take that into consideration and hopefully have good news in January. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, so that was awesome. So what actually happened was I am the owner of a Michigan proprietary school. And one of the programs I offer is the Nurse Aid Training Program. So it's been a lot of things happen since COVID, a lot of updates, and we were able to do virtual. So a lot of instructors got together and say, hey, can we just continue this? And it's awesome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my next curriculum class and do some discounts, and I'll be posting it. So I have a website and I have information where it shows you how to become, you know, have your own school, but the state of Michigan will help you do that. But as an instructor, trainer instructor, along with my son, who's my delegated instructor, and along with my cousin, who is, like they said, is as a nurse aide, they can be a, you know, like an assistant, a proctor. We're going to get it off. So 2023 is an awesome year. You should make it happen. All right. God damn it. Get up. As my dad would say, get up, clean up, and be somebody. So Nurse Ratchet is going to be leaving because the next webinar you may see will be what I'm doing, getting his home care, which is certified but accredited under this other program. So Jacob's too expensive. So all right now, deuces, and thanks for being with me on my first live. I appreciate it. Now I got to figure out how to end it.